How's it going, everyone? Blueknight here, and welcome back to the channel. So in the past 9 to 10 months, the 3D platformer genre has been greeted with two games that explore the theme of a multiverse. Well, technically free if we count Crash on the Run, but we're not discussing that today. No, I'm referring to Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, which released back in October 2020, and Ratchet Clank Rift Apart, which released exclusively on the PS5 last month. So basically what we're doing today is a bit of comparing between these two games and how they handle this particular theme. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the entirety of one game is better than the other solely because of this one aspect. No. This isn't that type of video, okay? If you prefer one game's story or gameplay over the other, that's perfectly fine. We're all entitled to our opinions. This is simply just a fun comparison video and nothing more. But fair warning, in case any of you guys watching have not played Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, this video does contain story-related spoilers for the game, as well as Crash 4, but given that the game has already been out for almost a year, and it's virtually on everything, I don't think I really have to worry about spoiling that one for you guys. Unless you haven't played it yet, in which case I suggest turning back now if you want to avoid being spoiled. You've been warned. So let's go ahead and start this comparison with Crash 4 simply because it came out first, and because I was actually able to play it on more than one system. So how it all starts in Crash 4, Uka Uka manages to find a way out of the prison that himself, Cortex, and Entropy have been stuck in for about 2 decades after the events of Crash Warped. Once free, Entropy and Cortex get to work on a rift generator so they can conquer all of time and space. This ultimately leads Crash and Coco to finding the quantum masks to fix the mess that the doctors have made. The problem is, they can't just find them immediately, because the rifts that Entropy's generator is creating either lead to different timelines in Crash's dimension, or they lead to another dimension entirely, and we can travel between each one via the dimensional map with these energy rails. Eventually, we find out that Entropy betrays Cortex because he's came up with a new plan to reset the timeline and rebuild it to his liking, alongside his new partner, an Entropy from another dimension, who just so happens to be alternate Tana's Entropy. Now, this is where I personally have a problem with Crash 4's take on alternate characters. Don't get me wrong, Toys for Bob did an amazing job with alternate dimension Tana in pretty much every single aspect. It's just female Entropy that I've got a problem with. Sure, her design is really good, and the fact that we've learned a little bit of her and Tana's history is also nice. But the way she was handled was not great, because we see her introduction to this chapter of the game, then we don't see her again until the boss section, and then the Entropies are knocked away to who knows where, and the game's 100% ending teases their return for the next game, and that's pretty much it. Now, I get that this is a Crash game and that the main selling point of the series was the gameplay, not so much the story, and while the story does so many things really well compared to other Crash games, it's just the handling of certain characters and interactions that wasn't as good as it should have been. Looking at Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart though, the story starts out with Clank repairing the Dimensionator and giving it to Ratchet as a gift so he can find the rest of his kind, the Lombaxes. Only for Dr. Nefarious to come along, steal it, and use it to find another dimension where he always wins. But the device gets damaged in the process, and reality basically starts to collapse on itself. So much to the point that both dimensions start to merge together, with the citizens becoming trapped inside of these plants from an alternate Sargasso, and Megalopolis merging with its alternate dimension version, Nefarious City, with some of alternate Ardolas sprinkled in, although the latter two instances were likely due to the Dimensionator's overuse. This results in the duo being stranded and separated in another dimension that is home to many different alternate versions of characters we've come to know and love from the series, all of which having their own and likable charms, combined with Insomniac's trademark humor, like Pierre Lefebvre being this dimension's version of Rusty Pete, who, in Ratchet's dimension, was little more than a second mate to Captain Slag, before pursuing other careers. In this dimension, he's a more respectable pirate with a French accent, and I love it.
Halt my hearties! Our command ship is lost! Destroy it now! Will it be the expenses? Are ye sure?
I also really like how Zerky is essentially the complete opposite of Mr. Zircon from Ratchet's Dimension.
Zerky's is a violence-free zone. Taken outside.
I think this was actually one of my favorite alternate characters in the game because I honestly wasn't expecting this after hearing this for so long.
Mr. Zircon is here.
But the bigger star of this dimension is Rivet, a rebel Lombax that serves as this dimension's version of Ratchet, and I gotta say, I just love the interaction between these two when they first met.
What's it? Hey.
Hey! Yes, hi. I have Clank.
It was a really cute moment, especially seeing Ratchet kinda nervous about meeting her, which is something we never got to see much of before Rift Apart. Now Rivet, unlike Ratchet, has been working alone all this time to take down Emperor Nefarious, which ultimately costs her her arm, which adds much more depth to her character as a result, leading her to being insecure, not trusting robots, and having a case of PTSD, which really shows when she finds out that her dimension's version of Clank is the reason she lost her arm in the first place, leading to a mental wound, you could say, to be reopened, causing some trust-related issues with Kit later on in the game, before looking beyond each other's past in the end. Now remember my complaint about how I felt female entropy was underused in Crash 4? Well, this brings me to the main villain of Rift Apart. No, not Dr. Nefarious. I'm talking about Emperor Nefarious. That's right, this guy, who Insomniac waited until the game's launch trailer to reveal. Talk about saving the last reveal for last, am I right? Now yes, I'm aware that both games had two versions of a character with Nefarious in their names, on top of a multiversal plot, and a dimensional map on top of that. I mean, this isn't a coincidence, right? But anyways, back to the point I was trying to make. Unlike female Entropy's short appearances in Crash 4, Rift Apart's Emperor Nefarious was actually hinted at pretty much at the start of the game, all the way until his appearance close to the end of the game, and having a consistent presence in the story until the very end, when he's defeated. And in the time we do see him, he doesn't feel overused, just like with a lot of characters in the game. He's not too similar to his dimensional counterpart. Actually, he kinda dislikes him, and I feel that dynamic really works, on top of him being more cunning and ruthless than our Nefarious, and pretty much the only objective he has in mind is to seize power for power's sake, and continuing to win, giving him a bit of a superiority complex. And when he finally does succeed at conquering his own dimension, he doesn't feel satisfied at all.
That's it. Where's the joy? The bliss? The murderous enlightenment? Why don't I feel any different?
Because you equated happiness with success. And now that you've achieved it, life is meaningless.
This ultimately leads him to planet Savali to acquire the dimensional map, allowing him to try and conquer every dimension in existence, starting with Ratchet and Clank's dimension. And that's basically as far as I'm going to go with Emperor Nefarious' appearance in this game, but I think you get my point on how much better he was handled compared to Crash 4's female Entropy. But that's not to say that they won't do anything more with her in the next game. I just think if more of this alternate character stuff is going to be done in the Crash series, there just needs to be better handling of these characters and Aku Aku in the future. Now, the last thing before ending the video is something that I just have to bring up, or else this wouldn't really be a true comparison video, and that concerns how traveling between dimensions work in these two games. Well, in Crash 4, it's a matter of going through a rift, mostly through cutscenes, riding on some energy rails on the dimensional map, and boom, you've arrived in the next dimension or timeline. Although, in the case of the Entropy boss battle, this is the only instance in the game where you actually enter a rift and see what it's like traveling through the many different dimensions before facing off with the Entropies. It's a really nice surprise the game throws at you, and it remains one of my personal highlights of the game. Now, looking at Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, the rifts are essentially tied into the very fabric of the overall game, allowing for a whole new level of possibility to be reached thanks to the power of the PS5's SSD. At the start of the game, you're hopping between various planets from Ratchet's and Rivet's dimensions, while at other points throughout the game, you'll be sucked into other planets from Rivet's dimension. But on planets Cordelian and Blizzard Prime, you'll use Blizzon crystals to instantly be transported between Ratchet's and Rivet's versions of the same planet, one being in a different state than the other. And that's not even talking about pocket dimensions, cascading entropic fissures, and rifts being used for quick traversal, all of which being signs of a dimensional collapse between Ratchet's and Rivet's dimensions. And that's another thing too. In Crash 4, there doesn't seem to be any real repercussions for punching holes into reality, because the rifts just appear and nothing else really happens, besides Dingodile always getting sucked further and further away from home. Poor guy. But in Rift Apart, there are actual consequences for messing with reality, both accidentally and intentionally. And with as many examples as I've given throughout this video, I think you pretty much get the idea on how it all works in Rift Apart. So if you ask me which one is better in terms of a multiverse, I'm personally going to have to say Rift Apart, simply because of how much more Insomniac managed to flesh out the idea compared to Toys for Bob's take on it with Crash 4. So with all that said guys, that's all I've really got to say for this fun little comparison video between these two games. As always, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, be sure to leave it all down in the comments section below. Also be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for more Crash and Ratchet & Clank content coming your way real soon. And once again, thank you all so much for watching and for constant support. I've been Blueknight, and I'll see you guys back here next time.